The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. Gracious God, in this hour, open our hearts and minds to receive your presence, to receive your confidence, comfort, and strength, that we might go forth with your confidence, strength, into a hungry and hurting world. We ask it in Christ's name. Amen.
Does that have a name? Dixie? Dixie the what? Dixie the pink angel rabbit bear? Oh, it's a bear. An angel bear? Come on and sit. So, how many of you have T-shirts at home that you wear on a regular basis? Do you ever wear T-shirts, shirts, something like that? Yeah, sometimes. Yeah. So the shirts you picked this morning, how did you choose what you decided to wear? How did you choose pink and blue and patterns and stripes? No clue? Mom just said, there you go, or Dad said, I like this one, or this, there's a clean one, grab that, right? I've got a whole drawer full of T-shirts, T-shirts from when I went someplace and I wanted to remember the place, or it did something and I wanted to remember it. And every other day or so, I try a different one for when I go out to walk the dog. And someday I pick the blue one. Sometimes I pick the green one. I'm kind of partial to maroon right now. I like my maroon T-shirts because it's fall out. Did you know that the church has colors and fabrics that go by the week and the month and the season? Bet you didn't know that. You see all these up here? Those are kind of like the church's T-shirts. They tell us something about what the church has done or what we're supposed to remember, and the colors all have meaning. We call those paraments. It's the fabrics and things that go on the altar or the pulpit or the lectern, that kind of thing. So all the way across there, what are the colors we got? We got green, we got blue, we got purple, we got black, white, and red. Do you know what they mean? Do you know when we put them out? I can tell you, yes. Right now, we're in the green season of Kingdom Tide, and you can see that we've got green and yellow up here on the sides as well. Green is kind of the longest part of the year. We're just going on and on and on with green, which is Kingdom Tide. And it's supposed to represent that whole stretch of time where Jesus was out walking around and talking to people and teaching and healing and doing his thing. Blue is for, do you know what time of the year is coming next? You got blue on? You don't know? You should know these, because you're telling me about what you're ready to do, even if you don't know it. Blue is the color of Advent. What's the time of Advent? What? Bingo. Christmas. Yeah, Advent's about getting ready for Christmas. So blue is the color for Advent. Purple, what's the color purple for? What comes after Christmas time? Into the new year, goes into the season of Lent when we're getting ready. Oh, what? What? Almost, yeah. But first, we got to go through a few other shirts, a few other changes of color. So from the purple of Lent, then right down in the last week coming up to Easter, the black is for Maundy, Thursday, Good Friday. That's a part of Easter too. And then finally white. Yeah, white is the color of resurrection and new beginning. So that's for Easter. And then what comes after Easter? What's the red for? No. We could make it that way, but it's not. That's the blue. What do you can you see the shape in the red on that one? Kinda, maybe, sorta. What does it look like? A bird, yes. Are there any stories in the Bible about birds and fire and wind and redness? It's a long ways away. It'll be in June. That's Pentecost. And that's the last one and the biggest one we're looking at right now, because that's what we celebrate as the birthday of the church. That's when we all kind of get going together in the church at the start of Pentecost, when the Spirit comes down, sets fire to everybody. They got the flames over their heads. Remember when we had the fans and the leaf blowers in here? That's Pentecost. So when you come into the church every Sunday, you'll see a color, usually up here and somewhere on the altar. And every time it's just like you putting on a shirt. It's trying to tell you something about what time of the year it is and what we're doing together. So we're in Kingdom Tide now. Pretty soon it'll be Turkey Day, and then it'll be Advent, and we'll all wear blue. Okay? That's the plan. Let's pray before you go. Gracious God, we give you thanks that down through the years, those who have come before us have showed us the way to remember what you have done and to point us towards what you are doing. Thank you in Christ's name. Amen.
Our entry into the time of prayer today is by the way of a poem. In this poem, the writer reflects on our strong temptation to expect God to follow our lead in prayer, that by our forming words around our wants, God will step up and sign off on our prayer list. Instead, we are called into confession. The title is Having Confessed, by Patrick Kavanaugh. Having confessed, he feels that he should go down on his knees and pray for forgiveness and for his pride, for having dared to view his soul from the outside. Lieth, time has its own work to do. We must not anticipate or awaken for a moment. God cannot catch us unless we stay in the unconscious room of our hearts. We must be nothing that God may make us something. We must not touch the immortal material. We must not daydream tomorrow's judgment. God must be allowed to surprise us. We have sinned like Lucifer by this anticipation. Let us lie down again deep in the anonymous humility, and God may find us worthy material for his hand.
Thank you, Barbara. This is a poem that has been in my hymnal for a long time, and we've used it once or twice before. And I keep touching back to it because it is, by my experience and what I have heard from others, the hardest part of prayer, which is to let go of all the stuff that's in our head, and as the line that the poet writes, to let God surprise us. If we already know and expect what God is to do according to our list, then there's no room for God to surprise us. That said, we do have a list, and so I would simply name that so we can let go of it, so we can set it to the side and let God's Spirit guide us as God's Spirit will. This has been a difficult week in the news and in many ways, and one of the things that occurred to me as I was tracking all of that was the burden upon our parents. How do our parents explain what our children are hearing? And so I would lift into our prayer awareness, our parents and the task they have with our kids. It's always a bit of a shock when we realize, oh, we're the adults. We're the ones that are supposed to know what to do, when so very often we are unsure and would gladly be children again and let someone else guide us. So prayers for our parents. Certainly prayers for all of those who have experienced any kind of sexual abuse, for the news this week has brought all of that to the surface and re-wounded those who have already been wounded. It is also perhaps in the background of the news, but needs to be a part of our awareness, the tremendous damage and loss of lives to the hurricanes and typhoons that are sweeping across Indonesia, and the continuing drama in the eastern United States as they recover from those hurricanes. With all of these named, let them be set aside in our minds so that God might surprise us. Let us pray. Gracious God, we would empty our minds of all our cares and concerns. It is harder to let go of what is in our hearts. We know we cannot let go of what is in our hearts, but we would ask to connect with your heart, and in that know the confidence that your compassion is sufficient. Your care for all of those who are in need is more than enough. So replace our list and surprise us with your Spirit so that we might be inspired to turn our words, to turn our ears, to turn our hands towards doing all the good that we can by caring for one another, reaching out to one another in your Spirit, and in this find together more than enough to face the day ahead. We ask it in the name of the one who told us how to pray with these words: Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever.
Been ducking the news this last week? Been on a long airplane flight, don't know what's going on? Been living in a cave on a lost island, don't know what's going on? Well, lucky for you, I've got the latest issue of the Persian Gazette to bring us up to date on what's been happening in the capital city. There's a lot of characters, though, so we may need a little help in identifying all the folks that are involved. So let's start with the cast of characters, starting with King Xerxes. King Xerxes, very successful, very popular, has been at it for quite a while. Not yet. I'll come to you, King. King Xerxes, matched by his Queen Vashti. Queen Vashti, key figure in the story we're about to hear. Then there is, who's this guy? Anybody know this guy? No, nobody knows. This is Mordecai. Mordecai. He's an uncle. He's a Jew. He's one who is a foster father, if you will, figure to Queen Esther. Esther is the central figure in our story. So they're connected. We'll tell a little bit more about them in a moment. And then there is, now if this was a synagogue, you would all know that when I say this name, you have to hiss. So get ready to hiss. It's Haman. Very good, very good. And his wife Zeresh, who also gets a little bit of hissing, although she was pretty savvy along the way. So our story, three other elements to keep track of as we go along here. What's at play in the story is the crown, the queen's crown, as well as in some way the king's crown, the royal power and authority and all the stuff that goes with that. There is also, like in any good drama, death. Death lurks around the corner in every way, around each character. And interestingly enough, in this particular story, the ledger book, the record book, the royal book that keeps track of what has been done and what is to be done, turns out to be a very important part of what's going on. So now let's dive into the news of the day about the king, his viceroy, the uncle, the niece, the princess, and all the rest. So we start with, oh, I forgot, one more motif you can keep track of. We'll be counting as we go along. 7 different banquets. Banquets is very much a part. Banquets, feasting, partying, drinking is very much a driving factor in this story about Queen Esther. So we're in Persia. You know where Persia is? Kind of Iraq, Iran. Actually, Persia was a huge at one time area that covered a good portion of the Middle Eastern world. And King Xerxes has been, at this point, in power for 3 years. He has consolidated his power. He's got he's got everything. In fact, he's got so much of everything, and he's so happy about it that he throws not just a party, but a wild party that goes for 6 months. They have a party. The entire country shuts down, and they have a party for 6 months. Okay, that's maybe kind of a bit of a fish story, you know. Over the years, it got longer than what it may have actually been. But nonetheless, he hosts a banquet that goes on for a long time for everybody within his empire. Then he decides to have a second banquet just in the capital city, just for the, the officials, the inner circle of kind of folks, but still a pretty big deal. And it was one heck of a party. Wait a minute, I got to get the microphones going here because we got some other reporters in the field that are going to help us know about this story. So, Nancy, tell us about the party. Just the decorations.
The party was in the garden courtyard of the king's summer house. The courtyard was elaborately decorated with white and blue cotton curtains tied with linen and purple cords to silver rings on marble columns. Silver and gold couches were arranged on a mosaic pavement of polished marble, mother of pearl, and colored stones. Drinks were served in gold chalices, each chalice one of a kind. The royal wine flowed freely. The guests could drink as much as they liked. King's orders. Meanwhile, Queen Vashti was throwing a separate banquet for women inside the palace.
So part of the background to know there, just since we may not be familiar with wild Persian partying across the countryside, is ordinarily as a way to keep track of and sort of control the drinking. It was traditional for for the guest, all the guests had to match the king drink for drink. So you could drink no more or no less than the king as he drank. But in this instance, he's feeling so generous that he takes that rule off, and anybody can drink as much as they want. They've got waiters standing around at your elbow ready to pour more drinks. Usually then the way the parties happen back in the day, is they would all party and eat together, and then when the drinking starts, the women leave. The women leave, and they go have their own party. That's why Queen Vashti, this is important, that's why Queen Vashti is not on the scene for our next chapter. So at this second banquet that's smaller, just for all the officials and whatnot, on the seventh day, they've been partying for 7 days, and 7 is it's a symbolic number because it means fullness or completion, right? So on the seventh day, the king was, and I quote, merry with wine, and he orders the eunuchs to fetch Queen Vashti to display her beauty. Because, of course, he's displaying everything he's got. How much food and stuff he's got, how much party they have, how much drink they've got. He's going to show off all of his possessions, including Queen Vashti, but with this stipulation, that she is to come before the guests in wearing her crown only, because she is a beautiful woman, and he wishes to show off the beauty of his queen. However, Queen Vashti refuses to come just wearing the crown, and at this, the king goes nuts. He's furious, and he's trying to figure out what to do about it. So he calls in all of his experts on legal matters. So sort of the inner circle that has his here, the 7 top princes of the realm, to ask them, what can they do what can they do against Queen Vashti for not obeying the king's summons? So the first one, Prince Masib, spoke up to the council and the kings and princes. Prince number 1.
It's not only the king Queen Vashti has insulted, it's all of us, leaders and people alike in every last one of King Xerxes' provinces. The word's going to get out. Did you hear the latest about Queen Vashti? King Xerxes ordered her to be brought before him, and she wouldn't do it. When the women hear it, they'll start treating their husbands with contempt. The day the wives of the Persian and Media officials get wind of the queen's insolence, they'll be out of control. Is that what we want? A country of angry women who don't know their place? Goodness gracious.
Next, Mashir spoke up.
So, if the king agrees, let him pronounce a royal ruling so that it cannot be revoked, that Vashti is permanently banned from King Xerxes' presence. And then, let the king give her a royal position to a woman who knows her place. When the king's ruling becomes public knowledge throughout the kingdom, extensive as it is, every woman, regardless of her social position, will show proper respect to her husband. The king and the princess like this. The king did what Memucan proposed. He sent bulletins to every part of the kingdom, to each province in its own script, to each people in their own language. Every man is master of his own house. Whatever he says goes.
So, that's the advice of the princes to the king, and they all agree that, yep, that's what they're going to do. And so Vashti is first banished from the king's presence, which essentially means she returns to the cloisters of the harem and will never go out again. She's essentially disappeared. She's off the map. So now the king has to make arrangements for a new queen from a selection of beautiful young virgins from throughout the empire. That's how it works when you're king. So they send out the word, round up all of the most eligible young women, and then they are all given, do I have a picture of this? No. They're all given cosmetic treatments. It's interesting, this is in the Bible. They are given a long period of cosmetic treatments, special care by the eunuchs who know how to do this and get them all buffed up for their appearance before the king. Now, among these women, among the tribes and people that have been conquered by King Xerxes as a part of his extraordinary rule, including the Jews, is this Jewish orphan named Esther, who was raised by her uncle Mordecai. Now, the key here is that some rabbinic commentators say that she was actually Mordecai's wife, because in the Torah, an uncle is allowed to marry his niece. Again, that's how it was back then. Nonetheless, he is her steward and taking care of her, and so he makes sure that she gets a chance to participate in this appearance before the king, because that would be a good thing for them fiscally and otherwise, and she wouldn't be running around on her own. She'll be a part of the king's consort. She does indeed, the text says, find favor in the king's eyes. Finds favor in the king's eyes, which means they had a wonderful night together, apparently, and so he decides to throw banquet number 4 in honor of that, and another holiday is announced, and she is crowned as the new queen, which means she's first among all those in the harem. But on the advice of her uncle, on the advice of Mordecai, she does not reveal that she's Jewish, right? So that's under wraps for now. So Mordecai, now that Esther is inside the royal palace and a part of the harem, Mordecai sort of takes up residence and spends his day at the royal gate, because in this way he can kind of get a sense of what's going on in there, and he makes friends with the guards, and so he can pass word to her and find out from her how she is doing. Well, as he's there at the gates, there are 2 guards who plot to kill the king. And the name of the guards, I love this, the name of the 2 guards are Bigthan and Teresh. Well, if your mom named you Bigthan, wouldn't you have to be a security guard or a bouncer? I mean, that just kind of goes without saying. Nonetheless, whatever it is, they got a beef with the king, and so they make a plot to assassinate him, which Mordecai overhears. And so then he passes word through to Esther, and Esther has the king's ear, so she tells him, hey, Bigthan and Teresh, they're getting ready to assassinate you. So he flushes out the plot, takes them in, chops their heads off. That's the end of that. And it is recorded, this incident is recorded, that indeed there was this plot and it was foiled. But the anomaly is Mordecai's action was recorded, but not rewarded. Recorded, but not rewarded. Okay, chapter 3, book of Esther. Now we introduce, ready? Haman. Very, very, very good. So the king, he's busy partying. He's got to have somebody to take care of business, kind of run things. So he declares Haman as his viceroy, essentially the VP. He's the one closest who's going to actually get things done. And he is seated above all the others, and the instructions are given to all the servants in the household, all those within the royal city, anybody that goes by, to bow when Haman comes by. That's a part of the ruling class. They all got to bow when he comes by. Mordecai, however, he's sitting out at the gates, and every time Haman comes and goes through the royal gates, he doesn't bow. He doesn't do like everybody else. Everybody else bows. He just sits there, looks the other way, doesn't give him the time of day. Now, those around Mordecai, they're going, what are you doing? What do you think you're trying to get away with? What's this about? And so eventually Mordecai admits, he says, well, I'm Jewish. I don't believe this guy. He just took over our country. That doesn't mean I like him. So I'm not going to bow down to him. Well, Haman finds out about that, and he plots revenge, which for the royalty, that always means somebody's going to end up dead. And that's basically Haman's plan. But it's not enough. It's not enough to just punish Mordecai. Haman decides he's going to wipe out all the Jews. He's going to get rid of all of the Jews. But he can't do that on his own. He needs the permission of the king to carry out this genocide. And he figures out how to do it by, he's going to buy the right to do that. He's basically going to pay for the privilege of carrying this out. So here, this is the argument he makes with the king there.
Haman spoke with King Xerxes. There is an odd set of people scattered throughout the provinces of your kingdom who don't fit in. Their customs and ways are different from those of everybody else. Worse, They disregard the king's laws. They're an affront. The king shouldn't put up with them. If it please the king, let orders be given that they be destroyed. I'll pay for it myself. I'll deposit 375 tons of silver in the royal bank to finance the operation. The king slipped the royal ring from his hand and gave it as his approval to Haman for this genocide.
So now the plot thickens, and Haman goes to work with his officers, and they cast lots to find what's the right day for this slaughter to occur. It must be propitious. It's the casting of lots. That's what Purim means. The Purim, the Pur is the lot. That's where this festival comes from within the Jewish tradition around Purim. So they roll the dice, they figure out the right day for it, and indeed a royal decree is posted throughout the kingdom to kill all the Jews on that date. And once it is successfully posted, guess what? Of course, the king and Haman go and have another banquet and have a bunch of drinks to celebrate what they're going to do. Well, Mordecai hears about this impending genocide of his people. And so he goes into appropriately mourning, fasting, wearing sackcloth, and he protests at the royal gate. He makes his presence known there to protest this impending disaster. And there at the gate, he sends word in to Esther about this death warrant on the people and tries to convince her that she needs to intercede with the king. And he includes a copy of the public posting of what is going to happen. So that makes its way through to Esther, and she hears all of that. But where's Pam go? Here, okay. So she hears about that and talks it over with the eunuchs and the other girls in the harem, and then she sends this word back to Mordecai.
Everyone who works for the king here, and even the people out in the provinces, knows that there is a single fate for every man or woman who approaches the king without being invited: death. The single exception is if the king extends his gold scepter, then he or she may live. But it has been 30 days now since I've been invited to come to the king.
Now, when Mordecai heard that Esther said she would not go before the king, could not go before the king, he sent her this message: don't think that just because you live in the king's house, that you are the one Jew who will get out of this alive. If you persist in staying silent at a time like this, help and deliverance will come for the Jews from someplace else, but you and your family will be wiped out. Who knows? Who knows? Maybe you were made to be queen for just such a time as this.
Esther sent back her answer to Mordecai: go and get all the Jews living in the city together. Fast for me. Don't eat or drink for 3 days, either day or night, and I and my maids will fast with you. If you will do this, I'll go to the king, even though it's forbidden. If I perish, I perish. If I die, I die.
So Mordecai does get everybody to join in the fast. And they wear their sackcloths and ashes, and they do this for 3 days. And on the third day, Esther puts on her royal robes and goes to the king's court. Now, he sees her there. Remember, he hasn't seen her in over a month. You can guess the reasons for that. But he recalls her extraordinary beauty. And so he indeed stretches out the royal scepter towards her to show that she is not to be punished for having approached the throne. When she approaches, King Xerxes asks, "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Surely you shall have it, even unto half my kingdom." And she says, "If it pleases the king, let him and his viceroy Haman come to," you guessed it, "a banquet that I have prepared in my court today for the king." Now the king summoned Haman right away, and they went to the dinner with the courtesans and the harem. And while they were drinking wine, the king asked again, What is your petition, Esther? It shall be fulfilled." She asks him to come to a second banquet, more intimate, more private, and to bring Haman. They agree to do this.
Haman left the palace that day happy, beaming. But then he saw Mordecai sitting at the king's gate, ignoring him. Haman was furious with Mordecai, but he held himself in and went on home. Then he got his friends together with his wife Zeresh and started bragging about how much money he had, his many sons, all the times the king had honored him, and his promotion to the highest position in the government. On top of all that, Haman continued, Queen Hester invited me to a private dinner she gave for the king, just the three of us. And she's invited me to another one tomorrow. But I can't enjoy any of it when I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. His wife Zeresh said, build a gallows 75 feet high. First thing in the morning, speak with the king, get him to order Mordecai hanged on it. Then happily go with the king to dinner. Haman liked that. He had the gallows built.
So the plot thickens yet again. The gallows is built. Haman is laying in wait for Mordecai. Trouble is coming for sure. Meanwhile, that very night, King Xerxes has insomnia. He can't go to sleep. So what do you do when you're the king and you can't go to sleep? He has a pretty good idea. He calls for the officials to come in, and they begin reading to him from the royal court records. In other words, he's trying to put himself to sleep by listening to a bunch of dull details in history. But in the course of hearing that, he hears about Mordecai and how Mordecai saved his life. And he checks to see whether or not in the record that he was rewarded in some way, because that would have been a part of the official, you want to encourage people to save your life, and nothing was done. Now, at this exact moment, Haman shows up. Let's try it. Haman shows up because he's coming to ask the king for the okay to go ahead and hang, to kill Mordecai. So he's coming in with this one idea, and but the king has another idea. He's got a question. So as Haman comes in, he jumps ahead and he asks him, say, what should I do? What would you do? What should I do for someone who has done something good for the king and the king wishes to honor him? What would be the right way to honor somebody? Well, Haman, he thinks the king is talking about him. So he says, oh, well, I think the proper thing to do would be that you would give this man some of the royal robes that you yourself have worn, and get your royal horse, and put him upon the horse, and have him led about the city with a trumpeter, announcing, see how the king rewards those who do good things for the kings. That would be the right thing to do. And of course, the king says, that's a great idea. Do that for Mordecai. You lead the horse. So Haman is really out of it now. He does indeed lead the horse around, and he is utterly and thoroughly humiliated. All right, now we're coming to the last chapter of the story. Now it's time for Esther's second banquet with the king and Haman.
At the banquet, as they were reclining on the dining couches and drinking wine, the king posed this question once more. What is your request, King Esther? I'm willing to give you anything you want. Just make it your request. Even if it's half the kingdom you desire, I will make it happen.
And she answered,
If you favor me, my king, and if it pleases you, spare my life. That's all I'm asking for, that my people and I be spared. That is my wish. For there are some, my king, who wish to rid your kingdom of us. For my people and I have been sold, marked for destruction and massacre. Now, if the plan were simple to sell our men and women into slavery, I would have kept my mouth closed, because that would not have been important enough to disturb you, my king.
Who has targeted your people? Where is the man who dares to do this?
The man responsible for these actions is Haman. He is wicked and an enemy to my people.
Exactly. So in that moment, Haman's joy turns to terror before the king and the queen. Overcome with rage, the king leaves where they're having the dinner. He goes out into the garden because you got to figure he has to take all this in. In one fell swoop, now he knows his queen is a Jew, that his viceroy has betrayed him, and oh, by the way, I okayed the genocide that she's calling me on. So he's got to figure a way to get out of this. Meanwhile, Haman stays behind. He knows that he is good as dead. He has no appeal whatsoever to the king. His only hope is going to be Esther. And so he begs for his life from her, and he's desperate. He's throwing himself on the couch where Esther reclines, grabbing at her, begging for her mercy. To which we get the final chapter.
Why am I cast as Haman?
You're not Haman. Just read the part.
Now the king came back from the palace garden into the banquet hall where Haman, thank you, is grabbing at the queen. And the king roared, "Will you even molest the queen while I'm still in the house, just around the corner?" At these words, all the color drained out of Haman's face. One of the eunuchs attending the king spoke up, "Look over there. There stands the gallows that Haman had built to execute Mordecai, who saved the king's life. It's right next to Haman's house, 75 feet high." The king said, "Hang him on it." So Haman was hanged on the very gallows that he had built for Mordecai. And finally, the king's hot anger was cooled for now.
For now. There are 3 more banquets yet to come, but that's really kind of a postlude. So this has been the reading of the book of Esther, the word of God for the people of God. All right, what lessons shall we derive from this extraordinary story? A few come to mind, and feel free to jump in and add them as you see fit. Number 1, every Sunday we come here. Every Sunday we come, and we're basically at that intersection point in exploring the timeless and the timely. What has come down to us through tradition and faith and history and the record of our sacred texts and all that we know, and how does it intersect with what's happening right now? How can it be that we have such an incredible example of something that happened by the calculations of this text 2,400 years ago, and yet it is as fresh as the last 24 hours in our news? All the same. Similar characters, similar actions. When I first started reading the story, I went back through all of it, and I was thinking, so what, in any story, what tips the domino? What gets the story going? And my first thought was, especially given the news cycle, well, it's Queen Vashti. She's the one who tips the first domino because she's the first one to say, no, I won't parade around in just my crown. I will not participate. You think that's right? No. The real story begins with who set up the dominoes. Who set up those dominoes? The culture of the ancient Middle East is still alive with us today. A culture and an arrangement of dominoes of cause and effect. It's rooted in the assumption of power, and particularly the assumption of patriarchy, the sense of entitlement, that those in power can call up a woman and command her to parade naked before the public and his friends. Who sets up the dominoes? Then who tips them over? Who messes with that system that has been established both then and now? We went to print, and Pam got it all the way printed, and I realized I wanted to change the title of the sermon just a little bit. And then afterwards, after you put it to print, I realized, no, the real title of this story, of the sermon, should be Boys Getting Drunk and Angry and Girls Getting Even. Am I right? I think so. More lessons to be learned if we're reading it closely. Hopefully those of you younger and older will see, gosh, is this anything new? Too much partying and drinking is likely to get you in trouble you did not plan for and end badly. 2,400 years ago, 24 hours ago. The story shifts when the pattern of banquets shifts. Did you note that? There's the feasting, the partying, the drinking, and it shifts when Mordecai fasts. He does the opposite of the feasting. Flips feasting to fasting, and now the story shifts. As always, nothing new here, but it's good to see another story where the one with the power was foolish, the one without power was wise. In other words, wisdom does not come with riches and position, and the absence of riches and position does not preclude wisdom. Especially as Mordecai persuades Esther, remember where you're from, whose you are. Stay in touch with your family and those who brought you forward. Lesson number 1, number 17, doesn't need a number, it just needs to be present with us. Doing the right thing always costs you something. You have to be willing to risk to do what is the right thing. It turns the corner when Esther takes up, in Christian imagery, when she takes up her cross, where she says, if I perish, I perish. If I die, I die. So the question that always comes with that is, you're going to perish, you're going to die sooner or later, so what for? What will you give your life for? In this story, she's willing to perish and risk everything, not for herself, but for her people. Lesson number 10, maybe where you are is because you're supposed to do something. Maybe you're there at this time for this particular task. It's not always welcome, but it may be why you are there. And the clue is that the harder it is, probably the more right it is. Stray footnotes. If you really want to bug the ruling class, hang outside their security gates and don't wave and bow at them. Real simple. Under no circumstances, I love this, under no circumstances, assume you know who the other person is talking about. Right? King's asking Haman about how to, Haman thinks, he thinks it's all about him. And then right with that, when you've fallen in a hole, quit digging. Right? Haman is, he's been digging this hole all the way through, and he gets to the end, he's scraping the bottom, pleading with Esther. It does strike me, based on one of the little clips in the news this week, is what Esther does, she is risking herself for her people. One of the news analysts today talked about and reminded us that what our government is supposed to be doing, is supposed to be about, is for we the people. We the people. And the question is, who's in that we? Who gets to draw that circle of who is in we the people? For us within the faith community, we are called to always, always, always draw that circle broader and wider so that it is as wide as God sees. In other words, all people. All people are worthy. All people are worthy of respect at the very least. And for people within the Christian tradition particularly, not just respect, but compassion. Compassion wedded with justice is the claim of the gospel upon all of us. That's the Beatitudes. Blessed are those who are oppressed, those who are on the bottom, those who are disadvantaged, those who don't have power. Blessed are those, for they shall see God, for they shall know peace. This is the nature of God. We are all God's people undivided. The first great division we are continuing to experience from that day until this is the division by gender. We continue to be out of balance. How shall we bring balance? The Esther story, by the rabbinical commentary as well as the Christian commentary is, here is a whole story in which God's name is never mentioned. And what happens is at the hands of the players, but most particularly Esther. In other words, the action is in our hands. In faith, we would say, we have been given what we need to do what we need to do. So what are we going to do? Thanks be to God, who keeps messing with us, that we might come into the kingdom. Amen.
Sing amen. Sing amen. Sing amen. 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 We praise your name, O God. Sing amen. Sing amen. Sing amen. 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 We praise your name, O God.
If you're here for the first time, we want you to have a special invitation to join in a time of coffee and fellowship, snacks over on Brooks Hall patio. Everybody else, you know where you need to go, and Ruth is waving her hand. Inside. Inside. It's a beautiful day out. Why not? Okay, whatever you say. Inside for snacks and refreshments. The discussion groups follow immediately after that. Feel free to join us in either Howell Parlor or in the main hall. Now may you go in God's peace, but carry with you God's fire. For indeed there are fires to be lit and thirsts to be quenched. Go in the name of Christ. Amen.